The island was not, as islands went, particularly remarkable. A teardrop of granite and stubborn soil cast into the cold embrace of the North Atlantic, it measured scarcely 3 miles from its rocky northern head to the sandy, shell-strewn southern cove. The locals called it Eilean Dubh, the Black Isle, not for its color, which was predominantly a weather-beaten gray, but for the brooding quality of its cliffs against the winter sky. To the handful of souls who clung to its leeward side, it was simply home. On a morning in the late spring of 1755, the wind carried the scent of salt and blooming thrift, and a tension that had nothing to do with the weather. Myrie MacLeod, at 16, felt it in her bones as she hauled the creel of damp seaweed up the steep path from the tideline. Her back ached, her hands were raw, but the view from the headland still stole her breath. The sea today was a patchwork of hard blue and deeper indigo, stippled white where the currents wrestled. To the east, the hump of the mainland was a smoky silhouette. And to the west, nothing but the endless, heaving horizon. Staring won't fill the peat stack, Mo Nyan asterisk. Her father, Alistair, appeared beside her, his own creel dwarfing hers. His face was a map of wind lines and sun squints, his beard more salt than pepper. I was just looking, she said, defensive. Looking for ships that aren't there. Or looking for ones that are. She didn't answer. They both knew. For weeks, the talk in the single, smoky tavern in the island's scant village had been of nothing else. Of land clearances on the larger islands to the south. Of whispers from the mainland, young men pressed into service for wars in foreign lands, landlords turning sheep into more profitable tenants than people. Eilean Dubh asterisk had been spared, so far. Its soil was too thin, its harbor too poor for large vessels. But a chill had settled on the community, a sense of being a page that might soon be turned. Come, Alistair said, his voice softening. Your mother has broth. Their home was a low, thick-walled croft house, part stone, part sod, huddled like a lamb against a hill. Inside, the peat fire smoldered, filling the single room with a smoky, earthy perfume. Myrie's mother, Elspeth, stirred a pot suspended over the flames. Her younger brother, Rabba, 8 years old and perpetually grubby, mended a fishing net with more enthusiasm than skill. Any sign of the asterisk morag? Elspeth asked, not turning from the pot. The asterisk morag asterisk was the island's lifeline, a 40-foot yawl that made the treacherous crossing to the mainland twice a month for supplies, news, and the occasional passenger. Not yet, Alistair said, settling on a 3-legged stool with a groan. But the wind's fair for it today. They ate in silence, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the winds keen around the roof stones. The silence was not empty, it was full of waiting. It was Rabba who heard it first. He dropped his netting needle and scrambled to the small, deep-set window. A shout. From the harbor. They all went out, joining a trickle of other crofters emerging from their homes. The village was a scattering of a dozen houses, a byre, the tavern, and a tiny, whitewashed kirk, all clustered around the only semblance of a bay the island possessed. The asterisk morag asterisk was indeed there, her tan sails furled, rocking gently in the swell. But the usual bustle of unloading was absent. A tight knot of men stood on the pier, centered around the asterisk morag's skipper, Callum Beaton, and a stranger. The stranger was the source of the tension. He was a man of middling years, dressed not in the practical homespun of the islanders, but in a coat of dark serge, worn but of evident quality. He held a wide-brimmed hat in his hands, and his hair, tied back, was the color of old iron. His eyes swept over the gathering crowd, assessing, calculating. Callum Beaton stepped forward, his face uncharacteristically grave. People of Eilean Dubh, he called, his voice carrying on the wind. This is Mr. Gideon Pike. He brings word. Gideon Pike gave a short, perfunctory bow. Good people. I am a factor, representing the interests of Sir Hamish Forbes, who, as of last quarter day, has acquired the leasehold of this island and its appurtenances from the previous laird. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. The previous laird, an absentee lowlander, had been a distant, benign irrelevance. This sounded different. Alistair spoke, his voice steady but loud. And what word does Sir Hamish's factor bring to us? Pike's smile was thin, devoid of warmth. Sir Hamish is a progressive man. A modern man. He believes in the improvement of his lands. Surveyors will come within the month to assess the soil and the stocking. My word is one of preparation. Be assured, your cooperation will be noted. Preparation for what? called out old Ian the tavern keeper. For improvement, Pike repeated, as if speaking to a child. To determine the highest and best use of the land. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must consult with Mr. Beaton here about the rental rolls. He turned his back, a clear dismissal. The crowd broke into anxious clusters. Myri stood with her parents, the cold broth sitting uneasily in her stomach. The highest and best use. She had heard the phrase before, in hushed, fearful tales from displaced cousins in Sutherland. It seldom included people like them. What does it mean, Da? Rabba asked, wide-eyed. Alistair placed a heavy hand on his son's shoulder. It means we wait, lad. And we listen. But Myri was not listening to her father. Her eyes were on the *Morag. And on the other stranger. He had disembarked after Pike, unnoticed in the factor's wake. A young man, perhaps in his early 20s, tall and lean. His clothes were plain but not island-made, a faded military coat, buckskin trousers stained with travel. He carried a sea chest on his shoulder with ease. Unlike Pike, his gaze was not assessing the land, but drinking it in, the harsh curve of the cliffs, the purple smudge of heather on the high moor, the fierce green of the croft strips. His hair, under a knitted cap, was the color of beach sand, and his face, though tired, held a curious, alert light. He caught her staring and, after a moment's hesitation, gave a slight, awkward nod. Myri looked away, heat rising in her cheeks. The young man approached Callum Beaton as Pike stalked off towards the tavern with the rental ledger. A brief conversation ensued. Callum, still looking troubled, gestured up the hill, past the MacLeod Croft, towards the northern headland. The stranger nodded his thanks, hefted his chest, and began to walk. He passed close to where Myri stood with her family. Up close, she saw the weariness etched into his features, but also a resoluteness in his clear gray eyes. There was a faded scar along his jawline. He smelled of salt, wood smoke, and something else, a scent of faraway places. "Excuse me," he said, his voice a soft baritone, the accent strange, not quite Lowland, not quite English but melodic. "I was told there might be an empty dwelling. On the north point." Alistair studied him. "The old lookout bothy. It's been stone and cold these 10 years. No roof to speak of." "A roof can be mended," the young man said. "And stone is a good companion against the wind." "Who are you, lad?" Elspeth asked, her tone not unkind, but direct. He shifted the weight of the chest. Finlay Grant." He offered no more. Alistair exchanged a glance with his wife, then shrugged. "The path is yours, Finlay Grant. The bothy, and the land around it, is no man's to give or deny. Not yet, anyway." He said the last part with a dark look towards the tavern. "My thanks." Finlay's gaze swept over them, lingering for a fleeting second on Myri. Then he turned and started up the steep track that led out of the village and towards the wild, exposed northern tip of the island. "A watchman without a watch," Alistair muttered, turning back towards their croft. "Or a fool. Either way, his troubles are his own. We have enough brewing here." Myri, helping her mother with the creels, glanced back over her shoulder. The figure of Finlay Grant grew smaller against the vast, green and gray rise of the land, a solitary question mark against the enduring cliffs. Life, with its immutable rhythms, absorbed the shock of Pike's visit. The potatoes needed planting, the few sheep needed tending, the fishing lines needed baiting. But the anxiety hummed beneath the surface, like a hidden hive. The Morag * came and went, but brought no more news. The factor had left, promising a return with the surveyors. The island waited. And on the north point, a new rhythm began. Myri saw it first from a distance, while gathering nesting wool from the heather. A thin, steady column of peat smoke, paler than the sea mist, rose from the vicinity of the old bothy. A few days later, venturing out to check the family's lobster creels in the northern coves, she saw him. Finlay Grant was waist-deep in the freezing, kelp-strewn water of a rocky inlet, heaving stones. He was building a wall, a small sea pen to hold catch. His movements were economical, strong. He had patched the bothy's roof with sod and canvas, and a small, neat plot of ground had been turned beside it. As she watched, hidden behind a tumble of boulders, he straightened, wiped his brow with his forearm, and looked out to sea, his profile sharp against the sky. He did not look like a man fleeing justice, though many who came to remote places were. He looked, she thought strangely, like a man coming home to a place he'd never been. Curiosity, a dangerous and compelling force, got the better of her. A week later, under the pretext of searching for a missing ewe, she took the cliff path north. She found the sheep, happily munching on a patch of sweet grass, but she kept walking. The bothy was transformed. The stone walls were sound, the roof looked weather-tight. The small garden plot was now marked with rows of green shoots. A workbench sat outside, holding crude but effective-looking tools. And there was a door, a proper, hinged door of salvaged driftwood. He was at the bench, carving a piece of pale wood with a curved knife. He didn't look up as she approached, but said, "The ewe is down by the fairy knoll. She hasn't strayed." Myri stopped, mortified. "You saw me. I see most things that move on this headland." He finally looked up, and the faintest hint of a smile touched his eyes. "It's a small island, Miss MacLeod. How do you know my name?" "Callum Beaton at the tavern is a font of information. For the price of a dram." He put down the carving. It was a seabird, a puffin, caught in mid-flap. "Is there news from the village?" She shook her head, relaxing slightly. "No. Only waiting. It's worse than knowing." Finley nodded slowly. I've known that kind of waiting." He didn't elaborate. "Would you take a drink of water? It's fresh from the spring." It was an offer of peace, of hospitality. She nodded, and he fetched a wooden cup from inside. The water was indeed sweet and cold. "You've done well with this place," she said, gesturing around. "It's a start. The soil is thin, but it's clean. The sea provides. And the quiet," he looked out over the churning water. "The quiet is a balm. Where did you come from?" The question was out before she could stop it, impertinent. His gray eyes clouded for a moment. "A place where the land was fought over by men in fine coats who never worked it. A place where the highest and best use meant musket and bayonet." He picked up the carving again, running his thumb along the smooth wing. "I was a soldier. In the colonies. I saw enough of improvement to last a lifetime." "You deserted," she whispered. "My service was done. My conscience, however, was not." He met her gaze squarely. "I am no threat to you or yours, Myri MacLeod. I seek only a small island beginning. A place where a man's labor is his own." His words resonated deeply within her. They were all seeking that, weren't they? To be left alone to their labor, their lives. She finished the water and handed back the cup. "Thank you. I should get the ewe back." As she turned to leave, he said, if the factor returns. "Would you send word? I am somewhat out of the way here." She nodded. "I will." The walk back felt different. The island, her whole world, seemed subtly altered. It now contained a secret, a man with a past and a carving knife, who understood waiting and fear. The surveyors arrived with the summer solstice. They came on a chartered sloop, 2 dour men with tripods, measuring chains, and notebooks. Gideon Pike returned with them. For 3 days, they traversed the island, their presence a silent plague. They measured the in-by land of the crofts, they clambered over the common grazing moor, they took samples of soil and stone. They spoke to no one, except to demand a boy to carry their equipment. They paid Rabba a single shilling for 3 days' hard labor, and he came home each night sullen and frightened. On the 4th day, Pike called a meeting at the kirk. Every soul on Eilean Dubh * crowded into the small, bare building. The air was thick with the smell of damp wool and anxiety. Pike stood before the simple wooden altar, the surveyors flanking him like grim sentinels. "Good people," he began, without preamble. "Sir Hamish Forbes is a man of vision. His survey of Eilean Dubh is complete. The conclusions are thus: the land in the village bay is suitable for a limited number of hearths. The southern cove shows potential for a curing station for herring, should the fishery prove abundant. The central moor and the northern headland," he said, consulting his notes, "are marginal for cultivation but possess excellent grazing characteristics." Alistair stood up, his voice calm but firm. "Our grazing is there. For our sheep. Our few cows. It is our common land." "Common land is an inefficient relic, MacLeod," Pike said dismissively. "Sir Hamish's improvement plan is clear. The village will remain, for now, to service the curing station. Crofts will be consolidated. The moor and the headland will be given over to a managed flock of Cheviot sheep, a hardy and profitable breed. Tenants who wish to remain must sign new leases, with adjusted rents reflecting the improved value, and must contribute labor to the construction of the curing sheds and the shepherd's cottage." A stunned silence fell. Then the uproar began. "Adjusted rents. You've doubled them. cried Ian the tavern keeper, holding up the new lease paper he'd been handed. Where are we to graze our beasts? The headland is bare. A man can barely live there. Pike held up a hand for silence, which he did not receive. These are the terms. Those who cannot, or will not, meet them must make way for those who will. There are plenty on Skye and Mull who would be grateful for the opportunity. You have until the end of the harvest to decide. Sir Hamish is not ungenerous. He offers passage on the next ship to the Carolinas for those who choose to emigrate. The word hung in the air like a death knell, emigrate. To leave, forever. To be torn from the stone and soil that held their history, their dead. And the North Headland? Alistair asked, his eyes hard. There is a man living there now. A tenant of no laird. Pike's brows drew together. A squatter. On Sir Hamish's improved land. He will be removed. The new shepherd will require that ground. The meeting dissolved into chaos, anger, and despair. Myri stood with her mother, clutching her hand. Her eyes sought the small, high window of the kirk, as if she could see through stone and hill to the lonely bothy on the point. Sent word, she had promised. Now, the word was a sentence of eviction. That evening, the MacLeod croft was filled with angry, frightened neighbors. The peat fire seemed to give no warmth. Alistair sat staring into the flames, his face grim. We cannot pay the new rent, he said flatly. Not and eat. Not and live. We could try, Elspeth began, but her voice trailed off. They all knew the arithmetic of their lives. The margin for survival was thin at the best of times. The Carolinas, someone muttered. A fever hole, another retorted. My cousin died on the passage. Myri could bear it no longer. She slipped out into the twilight. The sky was streaked with violet and gold, achingly beautiful. She walked, not thinking, her feet carrying her up the now familiar path to the north. Finlay was outside, mending a net by the last of the light. He saw her face and stood. It's bad, she said, her voice trembling. They are taking the common land for sheep. Raising the rents. They know of you. Pike called you a squatter. He says you will be removed for the new shepherd. Finlay was very still. The fading light caught the planes of his face, making him look carved from the island's own granite. He did not look surprised. Only resigned, and then, slowly, resolved. When? He asked. End of harvest. A few months. He looked past her, at the darkening sea. A few months is time. Time for what? She cried, frustration and fear boiling over. To pack your chest and leave. To wait for them to throw you out. He turned his gray eyes on her, and in their depths, she saw not fear, but a fierce, cold light. No, Myri MacLeod. Time to make a stand. Not just for my bothy. For your croft. For the tavern. For the right to your own labor. How? There are so few of us. And he has the law, the laird, behind him. The law is a paper sword here, so far from the mainland, Finlay said, his voice low and intense. And a laird's power relies on the obedience of his tenants, and the ability of his factor to enforce his will. What if the obedience stopped? What if the factor found his will blocked? You're talking about rebellion, she whispered. I'm talking about defense. Of your home. My home. He gestured to the bothy, the garden, the sea pen. This is my improvement. My sweat and my blood are in this soil. I will not yield it for a Cheviot sheep and a factor's whim. And I do not think your father, or old Ian, or the others, truly wish to yield either. They are afraid. They need a plan, a spark. He was a stranger, an outsider. But he spoke with a conviction that burned through her despair. He had seen conflict, he understood the mechanics of power. And he had chosen Eilean Dubh. What do we do? She asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. First, he said, the ghost of a smile returning, you go home. Tell no one you came here tonight. Not yet. Tomorrow, after you've all had a night to sleep on the despair, speak to your father. Tell him the man on the headland has a thought on the matter, and would ask for a quiet word with him, and any others of like mind. At the Fairy Knoll, at dusk. The Fairy Knoll was a low, grassy mound near the high moor, a place of old stories and privacy. He may not come, Myri said. He will, Finlay said. Because the alternative is giving up. And I have seen the set of your father's jaw. He is not a man who gives up easily. Alistair MacLeod did come. So did Ian the tavern keeper, and 2 other crofters, Dougal, a giant of a man with a silent strength, and Fergus, whose clever eyes missed nothing. They met in the lee of the Fairy Knoll as the summer dusk deepened into a starry, navy blue night. Finley was already there. He laid out his case not with passion, but with cold, military logic. Pike has the paper, and he has the distant threat of Sir Hamish, Finley began. What he does not have is men. The surveyors are gone. When he returns, it will be with a hired shepherd, maybe a few enforcers from the mainland. They will be few, and we will be on our own ground. We are not fighters, Alistair said, though his eyes were fixed on Finley with keen interest. You don't need to be. You need to be stubborn. You need to be united. The first principle is non-cooperation. No one signs the new lease. No one moves. When the shepherd comes, he finds no labor to build his cottage. His materials go missing. His sheep meet with accidents. Sabotage. Fergus breathed, both horrified and intrigued. Defense, Finley corrected. The second principle is observation. We post watches when the *morag is due. We know the moment Pike or anyone else lands. We control the only boat. We control the information. And when they bring soldiers. Dougal rumbled, his voice like stones grinding. They won't. Not for one small island. It would cost more than the sheep are worth. This is about profit, not war. If we make it unprofitable, if we make it a thorn in Sir Hamish's side, he may just decide to lease it to someone else, or leave it be. Especially if we can offer a credible alternative. What alternative? Ian asked. Finley knelt and drew in the soft earth with a stick. We present a counter-proposal. Signed by every tenant. We agree to a modest, reasonable increase in rent, one we can actually pay. We agree to manage the common more sustainably, showing how our mixed grazing is better than a single flock. We offer to build and run the curing station ourselves, as a cooperative, paying a percentage to the laird. We show him that improvement with us is more profitable and less trouble than improvement without us. There was a long silence as the men digested this. It was a radical idea. Not defiance for defiance's sake, but a shrewd, collective bargain. It might work, Fergus said slowly. It just might. But it requires every single one of us to hold the line. No weak links. Aye, Alistair said, his gaze sweeping the others. One breaks, we all fall. Are we agreed? One by one, they nodded. The pact was made there, under the ancient mound and the indifferent stars. The next few weeks were a secret ferment. Myri became a messenger, carrying word between crofts with innocent-looking baskets of eggs or wool. A system of signals was devised, a cloth on a certain fence post, a particular arrangement of stones on a wall. The island, so open to the sky, became a web of silent communication. Finley worked ceaselessly. He helped Dougal reinforce his byre. He showed Fergus how to construct a hidden storage pit for grain. With Myri, he ranged over the island, mapping its defensive points, the narrow pass to the village, the hidden coves where a boat might land unseen. During these long walks, they talked. He told her fragments of his past, growing up in the Highlands, the death of his family in the turmoil after Culloden, his flight to the colonies, the brutal, forest fighting of the frontier wars that left him sick of empire and its hungry machinery. I fought for a king and a country that saw my people as savages to be cleared, he said one afternoon as they sat on a cliff edge, watching gamuts dive like white arrows into the sea. I will not stand by and see it happen here. She told him of the island's stories, of Selkies and Finfolk, of the ghostly Bean Nye who washed shrouds in the stream, of her grandfather who remembered the last Norse longship sighting. She showed him the hidden springs, the caves that flooded only at the highest tide, the single, gnarled rowan tree that was said to ward off evil. He listened, and in his listening, she felt her own world deepen, become more precious. He was not just fighting for a patch of ground, he was learning its soul, and in doing so, was weaving himself into its fabric. The harvest was brought in, a meager but vital yield. No one signed the new leases. A tense, united front was presented to Callum Beaton, who, though fearful for his boat's license, was secretly on their side. You're a mad lot, he told Alistair, but by God, you've got spine. The spark Finley had spoken of was struck sooner than expected. It was a blustery day in early autumn. The watch, young Rabba, proud of his duty, came pelting down from the high moor, his face flushed. A boat, not the *morag, a bigger one, heading for the South Cove. The alarm was raised. Stones were placed on walls. Nets were subtly strung across paths. The men gathered at Alistair's croft, tools in hand, not weapons, but hammers, hay forks, stout staffs. Finley arrived last. He had a long, wrapped object in his hand. He laid it on the table and unrolled the cloth. Inside was a musket, old but well kept, and a powder horn. A collective intake of breath filled the room. I said we were not fighters, Finley said quietly. And I meant it. This is not for fighting. It is for showing. A single shot, fired into the air, is a powerful argument. It says, we are here, we are prepared, and we will not be moved like cattle. It will be seen, not used. Do you trust me with it? Alistair looked at the gun, then at Finley's steady gaze. He nodded once, sharply. They moved as a body towards the south cove. The women and children watched from the doorways, faces pale but set. Myri walked beside her father, her heart a drum in her chest. The boat was a sleek, hired sloop. It had anchored offshore, and a dinghy was rowing towards the sandy beach. In it were Gideon Pike, a thick-set man with the look of a drover, and two rough-looking hands. They landed. Pike's expression of smug authority faltered as he saw the silent wall of islanders standing 20 yards up the beach. He recovered, striding forward. Good day. You see I have returned with Mr. Briggs, the shepherd. We will begin marking the ground for the cottage today, and I will collect the signed leases. Alistair stepped forward. There will be no marking, Mr. Pike. And there are no signed leases. Pike's face darkened. This is foolishness, MacLeod. You are defying your laird. We are treating with our laird, Alistair said, his voice carrying on the wind. He pulled a parchment from his coat. This is a petition, signed by every tenant household on Eilean Dubh. It outlines terms for a fair lease and a cooperative venture for the curing station. You may take it too. Sir Hamish. Pike stared at the proffered parchment as if it were a serpent. He made no move to take it. I am not a messenger for tenant demands. My instructions are clear. Mr. Briggs, proceed. The shepherd, Briggs, a man with cold eyes, gestured to his two men. They hefted bags of tools and made to move past the islanders. They didn't get far. Dougal and Fergus stepped into their path. No words were exchanged. The two hired hands, outnumbered and faced with a solid wall of grim, determined men, hesitated. This is trespass, Finley said, his voice calm but clear. He had remained at the back of the group, the wrapped musket held casually at his side. Pike's eyes snapped to him. The squatter. You are the cause of this nonsense. You will be on that boat when it leaves, in irons. Finley took one step forward. The islanders parted for him. He didn't raise his voice. I am a tenant of this island, same as these people. And we are telling you to take our proposal and go. Or what? Pike sneered. Finley unrolled the cloth from the musket. He didn't point it. He simply held it, and began, slowly and deliberately, to load it from the powder horn. The *SSH of the powder, the thump of the ramrod, were the only sounds on the windy beach. The color drained from Pike's face. Briggs took a step back. The theatricality of it was perfect. It was a statement, not of imminent violence, but of ultimate resolve. It said, we have passed the point of words. You would not dare, Pike whispered, but the fear in his eyes betrayed him. The shot would be for the birds, Finley said, his gray eyes locked on Pike's. But the next boat that comes without an answer to that petition, he left the threat hanging, patting the stock of the musket. The standoff lasted a full minute, measured in the crash of waves and the cry of gulls. The islanders did not move. They were a single organism, a wall of earth and bone. Pike broke. He snatched the petition from Alistair's hand. This is insurrection. Sir Hamish will hear of this. You will all be ruined. We will await his reply, Alistair said, his voice steady. Good day to you, Mr. Pike. Defeated, humiliated, Pike turned on his heel and stalked back to the dinghy, his men scrambling after him. The islanders watched in silence as the small boat rowed back to the sloop, which raised its anchor and turned for the mainland, a retreat as stark as any military rout. When the boat was a speck on the horizon, a great, collective sigh seemed to rise from the beach. Then, a cheer broke out, nervous at first, then full-throated and triumphant. Men clapped each other on the back. Women emerged from the houses, smiling through tears. Finley carefully unloaded the musket. He looked at Myri, who was staring at him with a mixture of awe and terror. He gave her that small, rare smile. The first battle, he said. Not fought, but won. But Alistair's face was still grave. Aye, we've drawn a line. Now we see if the laird decides to cross it. The waiting that followed was the hardest yet. They had thrown a stone at the giant, now they had to wait to see if it would awaken. The Morag made 2 runs without bringing any response. Tension coiled tight again. Finley, however, did not stop. He saw their victory not as an end, but a beginning. "We must make our case stronger," he told the core group one evening in the tavern back room. "We must show we are not just stubborn, but capable. We start the curing station ourselves. A small one, a proof." Using driftwood and stone, with every family contributing labor, they built a low, solid shed on the South Cove, near the freshwater stream. They salt-cured the late-season herring they caught, storing the barrels. It was work, hard work, but it was their work, filled with a new sense of purpose. Myrie and Finley were often together, coordinating, working side by side. The connection between them, forged in crisis, deepened into something else. It was in the way he handed her a tool before she asked, the way she knew to bring him a cup of water when his brow was sweaty. It was in the long silences that were not empty, but comfortable. It was in the unspoken understanding that they were fighting for the same, specific future. One evening, as they walked back from the cove, the setting sun setting the western clouds on fire, he stopped. "Myrie," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "When this is over, if we win our small island beginning, I would like to build a house. A proper house. Not just a bothy." Her breath caught. "On the headland. Where I can see the weather coming. But, it would be a lonely place for one." She met his gaze, the wind whipping strands of hair across her face. "It would be," she agreed, her voice soft. He took her hand, his own rough and warm. "I am not a man of fine words. Or fine prospects. Just this island, and this will to hold it. It's enough," she said, and knew with utter certainty that it was. "It's more than enough." The answer from Sir Hamish Forbes came with the first gales of November. It did not come with Pike. It came in the form of a sealed letter, delivered by a subdued Callum Beaton, addressed to the tenants of Eilean Dubh. They gathered in the kirk again, the same crowd, but the air was different now. There was a hardened confidence in their postures. Alistair broke the seal and read aloud, his voice growing stronger with each line. "To the tenants of Eilean Dubh. Your petition, and the report of my factor, Mr. Pike, have been laid before me. I am not accustomed to treating with tenants as a collective body. However, the circumstances are unusual. Your proposed terms for rental adjustment are not unacceptable. Your offer to construct and manage a curing station as a cooperative venture, with a percentage of profits to the estate, demonstrates a commercial spirit I had not anticipated. Mr. Pike's conduct in this matter has been reassessed. He will not be returning to Eilean Dubh. A new factor, Mr. Murray, will visit in the spring to formalize leases based on the principles outlined in your petition, with minor modifications to be negotiated. The proposal for a shepherd and cheviot stock is hereby suspended, pending review of your communal grazing plan. Let this be an end to the recent discord. Industry and cooperation are the true paths to improvement. Sir Hamish Forbes, B.T. For a moment, there was perfect silence. Then, the kirk erupted. Not in cheers this time, but in a profound, shuddering release of breath, of fear, of tension held for months. There were tears, embraces, disbelieving laughter. They had done it. They had faced down the giant, and the giant had blinked. Alistair found Finley at the back of the crowd. He grasped his hand, then pulled him into a fierce embrace. "You gave us the spine, lad. And the sense. You had the spine all along," Finley said. "You just needed reminding." Winter closed in on Eilean Dubh, but it was a different winter. The wind still howled, the seas still raged, but inside the crofts, there was a warmth that had nothing to do with the peat fire. It was the warmth of a future secured, of a battle won not by violence, but by sheer, collective will. On a clear, crisp day just before Yule, with a hard frost silvering the grass, Myrie and Finley walked to the northern headland. The bothy stood stout against the wind, smoke whispering from its chimney. "A proper house," Finley said, looking at the site he had in mind, a slightly more sheltered spot behind a ridge. "With a room for your parents, when they are old. A room for Rabba to visit. A big hearth. And a window," Myrie said, taking his arm, facing the sea. "To watch for ships." He said, smiling fully for the first time she could remember, the expression transforming his weary face. To watch for ships. And to know that we choose which ones to welcome. He turned to her, his gray eyes serious now. Myri McLeod, will you build it with me? This house. This life. On this small island beginning. She looked out at the endless, hopeful horizon, then back at the man who had sailed from a world of war to help them defend their peace. She thought of the petition, the musket on the beach, the curing shed they had raised together. Their story was not one of grand conquest, but of quiet, relentless holding. It was a story written in stone walls and salt barrels, in shared looks and united breath. Yes, she said, and the word was a vow, as solid as the granite beneath their feet. Yes, I will. And as the winter sun, pale and brilliant, broke through the scudding clouds to illuminate the headland, the island, and the wild, wide sea beyond, it felt not like an end, but like the very first page.